So, I'm hoping that you've had 36 hours or 2 days of really intense and feisty discussions at which there were serious disagreements, which possibly led to you, on occasions, feeling really angry. Because I want to speak up for the authenticity of anger about today's difficulties. And I'm hoping that you heard people say something and every bit of you kind of rose up and said, that's just crap, that's just absolute rubbish, I totally disagree with that. And that you heard other people speaking and said, that's what I'm aligned with, that makes sense to me. Because I think sometimes we are unbelievably polite about these debates in our wondrous, inclusive world. 10 years ago, 9 years ago, a small caucus of Americans introduced an idea into the American environmental movement off the back of a very powerful series of lectures which ended up in a book called The Death of Environmentalism. Okay, you know where you are with a title like that. And these were two very eminent environmentalists, one from the Sierra Club and one from, WWF and a host of different organizations, who basically said the whole environment movement in America had lost their way. They'd become totally focused on working on the Hill, Capitol Hill, totally focused on legislative responses, totally focused on technocratic incrementalism as a way of winning the next battle as effectively as they could. And this was a devastating attack. I mean, I just kept thinking to myself, thank God it's an attack on American environmentalists, because back here in the UK or Europe, we'd all be absolutely devastated by that, because it was absolutely to the point. It really went for it. It said, you've lost the heart of what we all stand for. You've lost that sense of a deep values conviction. You can only talk to people via all these intermediaries to do with legislators and other people in society. And it was all coined in, why did you let the far right, these neoliberal fundamentalist wackos, why did you allow them to seize the high ground of politics in the United States? Because they spoke to people via values, however aberrantly, that's what they did, whereas we've defaulted to this rather mean-minded technocratic incrementalism. Fantastic debate. It had the blogosphere absolutely buzzing for months on end. The nearest we have come to that kind of debate here in the UK was the publication last year of a very important report, in my opinion, called Signposts and Weathercocks by WWF. Such a stupid title, I just can't understand it. But anyway, it's probably the only reason I can remember it. But Signposts and Weathercocks, which was, in wonderfully understated academic English niceness, was actually saying exactly the same thing. That the green groups now are in danger of losing it because they are wedded to a set of technocratic, inappropriate change mechanisms now that will never get society to buy into this deeper message that we're trying to get across. Again, the attack was, you don't dare talk to people at the level of values. You don't dare open up the wider discourse about the deep relationship between ourselves and the natural world. The language is now mostly about incremental behavior change, what's called foot-in-the-door incrementalism. Yes, you can do the really best thing possible by changing your light bulb, by offsetting your carbon, by doing this, by doing that, whatever it might be. Now, I'm actually a pretty big fan of small-scale, foot-in-the-door incrementalism, because for me, it has the potential, and indeed I think the evidence is there, it has the potential to lead people on to rather deeper change than the one that got them through the door in the first place. So I'm not completely happy with the criticism, because there's a lot of evidence, I hope Nick would bear me out here, that shows that people do need to find relatively easy points of access to bridge the gap between where they are and where they think or where they know they need to be. And it doesn't happen in terms of an endless sequence of road to Damascus type conversions. That's not the way it works. It works, unfortunately, in a much more complicated and stodgy way than that. So I'm a bit torn here in this debate because I actually believe we do need a far more passionate, values-driven advocacy around what we're doing to the natural world, in which anger still plays a very large part. And I also think we should be absolutely consistent in advocating change processes which, in and of themselves, don't necessarily look particularly transformative. Is that just me trying to have my cake and eat it? Probably. And I must admit, I am worried sometimes about my ability to celebrate multidimensionality, to sort of be everywhere, as it were, in terms of these dichotomies, these polarities between things. You know, I love the good news about what's happening in the world today, but I love getting stuck in and giving people a really hard time about the bad news. I'm in real trouble at the moment because I've just written this article about Obama being well, I better temper my language for the purposes of a final talk this afternoon, but Obama essentially running the risk now of turning out to be worse on climate change than George Bush. I know that will shock you, but the truth of it is the negotiating position that Obama's team is taking now in the run-up to Copenhagen is completely deplorable, just totally deplorable. I won't run you through the details of all of that, but it is honestly shocking. And I'm sure that Hugh Aranka Davis would have said, oh, our good friends, the Americans, we're all working towards the same goal. Well, bollocks, we're not. We're really not. America actually seriously wants to put Kyoto to one side completely and move towards individually negotiated abatement targets for countries against their own ambition level and their own particular cultural context. They want developing countries to sign up to mandated targets in the same way that the rich world does. All this kind of stuff going on at the moment. And given that the rest of the world, including countries like China and India, and I can't tell you how encouraging it is to hear leaders in China and India talk about this story now, given how much the rest of the world has moved, and given what we now know about the science in comparison to the time when George Bush pulled America out of Kyoto, this position is disgraceful. Nobel Prize or not. So, I couldn't help but default to my kind of shit-kicking mode here and went for it a bit, because this is the man who's going to lead the world into a kind of nirvana-like, wondrous sunny uplands in which all problems will be sorted. And you've just sometimes got to say, hang on a minute, this doesn't add up. This doesn't add up. So, I can't help sometimes but let my atavistic instincts about going for the jugular kick in, even as I spend most of my life now working with people who are making solutions work, trying to advocate the positive changes, doing the stuff with big business, as you said, Kathy. You can't really wade in on them and then expect them to pick themselves up on the ground and say, hey, that's what I really needed. A fantastic beating up. Most eloquently put, and thank you very much, Jonathan. We're all sadomasochists in this organization. It doesn't really work well. So most of my life is spent doing this kind of positive advocacy type role, going for the solutions, pushing people further on the basis that you can really work with their positive energy more effectively often than you can work with their negative energy.